Bertrand Russell's The Value of Philosophy. This is the last chapter from his book, The Problems of Philosophy. And he ends the book by arguing that while philosophy offers few definitive, conclusive answers to the difficult questions it attempts to answer, it's in the uncertainty that we find the benefits of the practice. It's in the realization of how little we know and how complicated and complex and mysterious the universe is that we experience philosophy's true benefits. We can think about this chapter in three different ways, and Russell makes his case through at least three different lenses, although I highly recommend that you read it directly yourself if you haven't. It's very short. You can probably read it yourself in the time that I can explain it. But you can think about philosophy as a discipline by contrasting it with empirical science. Scientists, of course, concern themselves with the empirical world. They want to uncover the so-called laws or regularities of nature. Philosophers want to similarly expand their knowledge base, but about different sorts of things. Scientists, as we typically think of scientists, enjoy the luxury of testable data, whereas philosophers do not. And so our job is a little bit more difficult, and therefore you might expect that our progress has been slower and more spotty. In many ways it has been, but in some senses, philosophy has been very, very successful. One reason to think that is that there were many disciplines that at one time were considered philosophy. Physics, for example, started out as philosophy. Astronomy, once philosophy. Psychology, once philosophy. When do they cease to be philosophy? Well, when those disciplines could produce testable data, things that you could reproduce, examine it by using the scientific method, having other people repeat similar experiments. When you're able to actually study physical principles by colliding electrons, by using electron microscopes to examine the laws of physics directly, you don't have to speculate and use reason anymore. You can directly see that stuff. And you can have people across the globe do the same in their labs and compare notes. Astronomy, until there were really good telescopes, you just had to kind of speculate. How do the stars interact with the rest of the solar system? Actually, the stars don't interact with the solar system. How do the planets within the solar system interact with the sun and with one another, if at all? What's the role of the moon? You could use math and such. That's one math combined with general blurry observation. You're starting to do some scientific work there. But once you got really fancy telescopes, now you can have more direct, clear observations and more testable data than you did before you had those tools. In psychology, before behavioralism, before MRIs, where you could look at inside a brain and generate a particular emotion in a person and see what part of the brain was stimulated. Before that, it was all left to argumentation and logic and reason, which are the tools that philosophers have to employ when they don't have testable data. So in one sense, philosophy, man, they still haven't settled what it means to be a good person. They haven't fully settled that. They still haven't fully settled what constitutes a just state. These arguments they have for and against the existence of a deity, they seem to be roughly equal. Man, it's just inconclusive. So on one hand, been very spotty and progress has been slow. On the other hand, all that other stuff started out as philosophy, so we've been pretty successful. You can also think of philosophy, Russell argues, as an expander of the self, and he contrasts the philosophic man, or the person with philosophic instincts, or the person who engages in philosophical thought, with the instinctive man and the practical man. The practical man is concerned with paying the bills, doing their job, going to school. That's it. They don't stop and reflect. They don't ponder. They don't think. They just do what's right in front of them. The instinctive man is driven by their base instincts. Are they hungry? Do they have sexual desires? Do they seek power? That's the instinctive man. Whatever's driving them, that's what they're doing. But Russell offers a cool quote on page 28 that gives us reason to think that having that philosophical approach might be beneficial. We might all want to take time to engage in it. He says, the life of the instinctive man is shut up within the circle of his private interests. Family and friends may be included, but the outer world is not regarded except as it may help or hinder what comes within the circle of instinctive wishes. In such a life, there is something feverish and confined in comparison with which the philosophical life is calm and free. Now, as a philosophy professor, I must say that I also get caught up in that day-to-day stuff. Everybody does. I must also say that my instinctive desires drive me in many cases. But I can also say that the ability to sit back and reflect and ponder the mystery of the universe, and to do so in a methodical fashion, building on the arguments and the progress that others have already made, that is freeing in many of the ways that Russell argues. Now, it's not something that's fully liberating. It doesn't generate the transcendent, in my experience. It doesn't generate the everlasting transcendent peace that one might say that it does if they're trying to romanticize the discipline. But it does, if I'm not being, I don't want to be arrogant or condescending or any of those things, it does generate a sort of wisdom whenever you're able to recognize how little that we know. Socrates was the wisest man in all of Athens because he realized how little he knew. There were so many people who were so certain in all the things that they knew, but Socrates knew he knew so little, and that's what made him the wisest man. Doing philosophy will teach you a lot of things, but one of the primary things he's going to teach you is how little you know. That might be unsettling to some. Tolstoy argued in The Confession that he wishes, or he longed for, the ignorance of the common farmer. I forget how he actually phrased it, but he witnessed the simplicity and the faith of certain individuals who had never pondered these difficult questions. And he thought, man, I'm so perplexed. I have so many doubts. I've considered these difficult questions. I know so much more now than I did when I was younger. And I look at simple folk who have never thought about this stuff and they seem to be more peaceful. I wish I could return to that. Russell argues, on the other hand, that there's far more peace in pondering these difficult questions and understanding that we know so little. Which of those approaches is actually true, I leave for you to decide, but there's a couple of different approaches. Last, you might think further about Russell's argument that doing philosophy allows us to transcend the here and now, and in that way connect with the broader universe in this deeper mystery. He says that we can occupy an objective God's eye view, or we might consider the way God views the universe, where we're not simply wrapped up in what we have to get done tomorrow and our sickness and our immediate concerns and whether our football team is going to do a good job or whatever people worry about day to day, but instead to sit back and reflect and to step out of our immediate situation and consider the ultimate nature of the universe and consider what might constitute a just state and to consider what constitutes genuine knowledge. Some people would say these questions are pointless and these pursuits are silly. Russell argues that to engage in these sorts of pursuits is going to make you better appreciate your own situation. It's going to give you an advantage over others in that you can transcend your instinctive desires. And he also argues that connecting with the universe allows us to expand our sense of ourself out to the universe as well, and out to these deep, difficult questions. And he thinks that both that helps us transcend the here and now. He points out that our bodies will ultimately die and pass away, but in connecting with these deep questions, that gives us some sort of a transcendence. Might not be fully reassuring, but he thinks that should be somewhat reassuring. And he also thinks that we're able and we naturally will expand our compassion and our empathy onto others and to all of existence, possibly, to the extent that we consider that we're just a small portion of it, and to the extent that we appreciate how complex and mysterious that it is. So there you go. There's my summary of Russell's The Value of Philosophy. Please do read it directly for yourself. I'm pretty sure you could have read it in the time that I gave you my overview. Russell's far more eloquent than I am, but it's a great read.